The hum of the highway was the only sound accompanying Alex as he gripped the steering wheel. The neon green glow of the dashboard clock read 11:43 p.m. Late again, he thought. His husband, Jake, would already be asleep, or pretending to be. Their arguments had grown sharper over the past month, cutting through the silences that used to feel comforting. Tonight's excuse, a work deadline, had only added to the growing chasm between them. Alex sighed and adjusted his rearview mirror, his tired eyes catching the flash of red and blue lights behind him. His heart sank. He hadn't even realized he was speeding. Pulling over to the shoulder, Alex turned off the engine, his hands trembling slightly. The police cruiser stopped behind him, its headlights cutting through the darkness like a spotlight on his guilt. The officer approached slowly, his figure silhouetted in the rearview mirror. When he reached the window, Alex rolled it down, the night air cool against his face. "Evening," the officer said, his voice deep and steady. "You were going 10 over the limit. In a hurry to get somewhere?" Alex looked up, his mouth dry. The officer was younger than he'd expected, with a strong jawline and piercing green eyes that seemed to assess him with unnerving precision. His badge read Officer Cole. "I didn't realize," Alex stammered, forcing a weak smile. "Long day at work?" Cole nodded, his gaze lingering. "License and registration, please." As Alex fumbled through his glove compartment, the tension grew palpable. His hands brushed against the papers, but his thoughts were elsewhere, on Jake, on their last fight, on how distant they'd become. It wasn't just the arguments. It was the absence of something that used to bind them. "Here you go," Alex said, handing over the documents. Cole's fingers grazed his as he took them, and Alex felt a strange flicker of heat that unsettled him. "Stay here," Cole instructed, his tone firm but not unkind. He walked back to his cruiser, leaving Alex to sit in the suffocating silence. Minutes felt like hours before Cole returned. "Everything checks out," he said, leaning down to meet Alex's eyes. "But I need you to step out of the car for a moment. There's something I need to discuss with you." Alex blinked, confusion and apprehension mingling in his chest. "Is something wrong?" "Just a routine check," Cole replied, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "Come on." Against his better judgment, Alex unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out into the cool night. The road was eerily quiet, the only light coming from the patrol car's flashing lights. Cole gestured for him to follow to the back of his car, his presence commanding yet oddly inviting. "Relax," Cole said, his voice low. "I just want to have a little chat." Alex's pulse quickened. He couldn't tell if it was fear, curiosity, or something far more dangerous. The cool night air prickled Alex's skin as he followed Officer Cole to the back of the patrol car. The world felt unnaturally quiet, the hum of distant crickets the only sound breaking the silence. The officer's stride was deliberate, his presence commanding. Alex kept his distance, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. "Stand here," Cole said, gesturing to the side of his vehicle. His tone was calm but carried an unspoken authority that Alex couldn't ignore. Alex complied, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes as he moved. He stood awkwardly, hands at his sides, unsure of what was expected of him. The officer stepped closer, his tall frame casting a shadow in the pulsing glow of the patrol car's lights. "This part of the highway can be unpredictable," Cole began, his eyes scanning Alex's face. "Lots of things happen out here after dark." Alex swallowed hard. I didn't mean to cause trouble. If this is about speeding..." Cole raised a hand, silencing him. "Relax. I said everything checks out. I'm just making sure you're all right. You seemed distracted." The words caught Alex off guard. Distracted? Was it that obvious? He shifted uncomfortably under Cole's gaze, which felt less like an interrogation and more like an appraisal. "I guess it's been a rough day," Alex admitted reluctantly, avoiding eye contact. Cole tilted his head slightly, his expression softening. "Rough day, huh? Or something else?" Alex hesitated, unsure why he felt compelled to answer. "It's complicated," he said finally. Marriage stuff. Cole nodded slowly, his lips curving into a faint smile. Complicated. I know the feeling. The officer's words hung in the air, their weight pressing against Alex's already frayed nerves. There was something disarming about Cole's candor, something that made Alex feel both exposed and comforted at once. Cole stepped closer, his movements unhurried. Listen, he said, his voice dropping lower. You've got nothing to worry about tonight. But sometimes, it helps to let off a little steam. Alex looked up, his eyes meeting Cole's. For a moment he forgot how to breathe. The officer's gaze was steady, almost daring, as if he were testing boundaries without ever explicitly crossing them. I don't, Alex started, but the words faltered. Cole had moved closer still, his hand brushing Alex's shoulder lightly. You seem tense, Cole said, his tone almost teasing. Is it just the speeding ticket? Or something else? Alex's stomach churned with a mixture of apprehension and something he couldn't name. He wanted to step back, to put distance between himself and the officer, but his feet refused to move. Cole's hand lingered for a moment before withdrawing, his expression unreadable. Think about it, he said quietly, stepping away. Alex blinked, his mind racing. Think about what? He asked, his voice unsteady. Cole turned, walking back toward his car. Over his shoulder, he said, whatever it is that's holding you back. Alex stood frozen, his thoughts a chaotic swirl as Officer Cole leaned against the patrol car, watching him with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. The night felt heavy, the distant rustle of trees amplifying the quiet tension between them. Still tense? Cole asked, his voice soft but loaded with implication. He gestured toward the hood of the car. Sometimes stepping out of your comfort zone helps. Go ahead, lean back for a minute. Alex hesitated, unsure if he was misinterpreting the officer's words or his intent. But something about Cole's demeanor, confident yet unthreatening, made him comply. He stepped closer to the car and rested against it, his palms flat against the cool metal. Cole moved beside him, their shoulders nearly touching. The proximity was electric, the air charged with an unspoken understanding. You don't talk much, do you? Cole said, tilting his head to look at Alex. Alex exhaled shakily. Not sure what to say. Sometimes words just complicate things. Cole's voice dipped lower, his tone almost conspiratorial. But actions can be clearer. Alex turned to face him, his pulse hammering in his chest. The faint smirk on Cole's lips was disarming, and Alex could feel himself teetering on the edge of something he couldn't quite name. He should step away, put an end to whatever this was before it went any further. And yet he stayed rooted in place. Cole reached out, his hand brushing against Alex's. The touch was deliberate but gentle, testing boundaries without demanding. Alex's breath hitched, and he fought the urge to pull away, or to lean in closer. You've been holding back, Cole murmured, his gaze locking onto Alex's. I can see it. You're carrying more than you should. The words struck a nerve, slicing through Alex's defenses. He thought of Jake, of the arguments, the distance, the night spent lying awake wondering if their marriage was unraveling. The weight of it all felt unbearable, and for the first time in months, here was someone offering an escape. Cole's hand moved to Alex's shoulder, the grip firm but reassuring. Sometimes, you just need to let go, he said, his voice a low rumble. Alex's resolve cracked. His breath quickened as he let himself lean into the moment, his defenses crumbling under the warmth of Cole's touch. The kiss that followed was tentative at first, a brush of lips that quickly deepened, fueled by months of suppressed longing and frustration. For a fleeting moment, everything else vanished. The guilt, the doubts, the consequences. There was only the present, charged and intoxicating, as Alex surrendered to the pull of desire. When they finally pulled apart, Cole's expression was unreadable. He stepped back, leaving Alex breathless and reeling. Think about what you want, Cole said simply, his tone neutral but his eyes still smoldering. Alex stood in stunned silence as Cole returned to his car. The distant hum of the engine starting snapped him back to reality, leaving him alone with his racing thoughts and a choice he couldn't avoid. The drive home was a blur. Alex's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white as he tried to steady the storm brewing inside him. The familiar landmarks of his neighborhood passed unnoticed, his mind stuck on the intensity of the last few minutes. His lips still tingled with the memory of Cole's kiss, the sensation both thrilling and damning. By the time he pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the faint glow from the living room window. Jake must have fallen asleep waiting for him again, Alex thought with a pang of guilt. He sat in the car for a moment, staring at the front door, his stomach churning with conflicting emotions. Stepping inside, Alex was greeted by the muffled sound of the TV, still playing a late-night rerun. Jake was sprawled on the couch, his laptop on the coffee table next to a pile of paperwork. His face, softened in sleep, reminded Alex of better days, of mornings spent laughing over coffee and nights tangled in shared dreams. Alex leaned against the wall, his heart heavy. What had he done? The weight of his actions pressed against him, and yet he couldn't ignore the relief he'd felt in those fleeting moments with Cole, the way he'd been seen, desired, and momentarily freed from the burdens that had suffocated him for months. But was that worth the risk of losing everything he and Jake had built? As Alex moved closer, Jake stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "You're home," Jake mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "Yeah," Alex replied softly, sitting on the edge of the couch. "You didn't have to wait up." Jake stretched and sat up, rubbing his eyes. "I wanted to. Thought we could talk." The words hit Alex harder than he expected. For weeks, Jake had seemed distant, consumed by work and the routines of their strained marriage. Now, here he was, offering the one thing Alex had been longing for, connection. "Talk about what?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake hesitated, then reached for Alex's hand. "About us. I know I've been distracted. Work's been overwhelming, but that's no excuse. I miss you, Alex. I miss us." Alex's throat tightened, his emotions swirling in a chaotic mix of hope and guilt. He wanted to respond, to reach out and hold onto this moment, but the memory of Cole lingered, casting a shadow over the fragile light Jake was offering. "Jake," Alex began, his voice faltering. Before he could finish, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Pulling it out, he glanced at the screen. A text from an unknown number. "Hope to see you again soon. Cole." Alex's breath caught. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, his face carefully neutral as he looked at Jake. "I'm here," Alex said finally, squeezing Jake's hand. But deep down, he knew the real answer was far more complicated. The weight of his choices hung in the air, unresolved, as the night stretched on.